Wherever you are in the world, a very warm welcome to the channel. My name is James. Usually I talk about the Three Gorges Dam, situations in China, etc. But today I want to concentrate on a part of China called Hong Kong. Now, we need a little bit of history before we start this. Hong Kong was handed over to the United Kingdom for 99-year rule as a lease way back in 1898, to be handed over to Chinese rule in 1997. Before this happened, in 1984, General Secretary Peng, I'm not too sure how to pronounce the name, basically had a meeting with the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom at the time, called Margaret Thatcher, related to the handing over of Hong Kong back to mainland China. And they came up with an agreement called One Country, Two Systems. And Hong Kong would be called the Special Administration Region of China. In other words, it would be handed over to China, but Hong Kong would remain exactly the same. No difference. Before 1997, a lot of people did actually leave Hong Kong of fear of the People's Republic of China. They didn't believe what would happen, and you can say nowadays, rightly so. And they went to Singapore or the island or country of Taiwan, UK, Australia, England, Canada, etc. And they were allowed the visas, etc., to stay. And all was fine. There was really no difference. The only difference possibly you could actually find, that if you think of Hong Kong as two parts, Hong Kong Island and Kowloon. In Kowloon, you would actually notice that less and less people did speak English, but in Hong Kong, you could say where all the businesses are, remained near enough the same. And people could just do their normal business. For British people, it did change that instead of staying for 1 year on your passport, you could only stay for 6 months. And because it was part of China, you would need some kind of work permit before you could fly from England to Hong Kong and get a job, being part of the, could I say, empire. Then 2014 came along, and this is when the umbrella movement started. What happened was, I think China was tired of waiting, because 50 years was guaranteed to the people of Hong Kong. One country, two systems. Hong Kong was going to be a democracy. So you could say the same as the United States, the same as Australia, Canada, Germany, France, or England. But this umbrella movement came about because the Chinese government, or Beijing, the CCP, they said that you can't vote, or you can't choose the candidates who are going to be voted into the government of Hong Kong, the Special Administration Region, Hong Kong, and Beijing would choose them. This sparked a big upset, and many people, a population of 8 million people in total, many people just took to the streets and protested. But these protests were quite quiet. If you went along one famous road called Nathan Road in Hong Kong, an area called Jordan and Mongkok, you could walk through, and I did plenty of times, walk through these protesters, and there was nothing happening. They were just upset, annoyed, and angry, and showing their anger through a sit-down movement on a really busy street. Eventually, this faded away like most protests, and this is what most governments would do. Just wait it out, and people get tired, they need to work, they need to go to university, and it slowly disappears. This happens near enough all around the world. Of course, like any protest you have in the world, there's going to be small pockets of unrest, so to speak, an emphasis on the small. If you did it in a percentage, you could possibly say 95, 96% of the protest was very peaceful. Millions of people turned up because this was not with the 50-year Freedom Act, which was signed again in 1984 with China and the United Kingdom handing it over. So you could see, especially the younger generation who are going to stay there, the students were actually very angry and annoyed of this because they knew it was the beginning. This should have happened, or China should have said, well, 2047 is when we can do this. But they did it early. This all sort of faded away, and it all came back to haunt again a little bit later in the 21st century. I forget the years, and I'm going to be really bad. 2018, 2019. It all started again when China started to do the extradition law, that if you have committed a crime in China, in Hong Kong, or if you said anything bad against China, if when you arrive in Hong Kong, you could be extradited to mainland China. Of course, this is breaking the 50-year rule again for the second time within the space of 4 years. And there were big protests. Millions of people peacefully demonstrated. Now, whether this is legal or illegal related to the Hong Kong law, I don't know. And again, yeah, like most protests you see around the world, like in London before, like in, I don't know, Los Angeles, Australia, Japan, there is a small percentage of unrest, and that unrest you see from the media, the mainstream media, building it all up. In the case of Hong Kong, it was the police were the bad people, and with the Chinese media, the protesters were the bad people. There were some indirect funds coming from the United States, they say, funding the protesters. Now, why would America get involved in this? This is a local thing, but media's on both sides, the Chinese side and the Western side, did blow this out of proportion. I was there. I wasn't protesting. I was just there, walking through the protests, no problem at all. I only saw the unrest. I'm using this word very carefully. I only saw the unrest on the news, like the rest of us. Then the protesters actually won this extradition, and it was shelved. But very soon afterwards, they introduced the national security law. Now, every country does need security, every country does need law, but this law is very vague. And over the years, the Tiananmen Square Museum has been taken down. Apple News, not Apple from America, but Apple News from Hong Kong was taken down for this vague law. So people don't know. I was literally speaking to a person, a nurse actually, in Hong Kong, who had been offered a position as a nurse in New York City. And she could not wait to leave because she doesn't like Hong Kong anymore. It's not the same. There's not freedom. This is a quote from a Hong Kongese person. If you see some of the videos of the unrest, you could say, the people with the umbrellas are the protesters, but there are also people from mainland China there. And they would be the people they were fighting against in the subway stations. The videos I'm going to sort of leave out because we don't know everything. Of course, the pro-China shills would actually say they are wrong, and they would emphasize there were violent protests everywhere, when there weren't. They were just small pockets of them. And again, I was in Hong Kong during this time, staying in the Holiday Inn, for example, and it was just peaceful, and the protests were peaceful. Maybe in a way there were shouting, saying down with the CCP, but that was about it. And I didn't see any violence at all. I didn't go searching for it, but I knew it was happening. And that's my whole story about Hong Kong. What's going to happen in the future? You can see slowly they're taking away books about Tiananmen Square, which happened in 1989. The schools are now teaching Mandarin and more than Cantonese, their own language, and then less English. So the CCP, what they've done is just little snips, taking it away, taking it away, taking it away. And the protesters, yes, generally they are young. There are, yes, people in Hong Kong pro-CCP, and they love the national security law. But I would say most people don't, and they would like it to return to the original Hong Kong. One country, two systems was working perfectly for them, but it was the CCP Beijing who started all of this way back in 2014 with the umbrella movement. You can see how the government of China, the mainland China, they lie. They don't keep their promises. So when something comes out about carbon neutral by 2060, we just don't believe them because we have the history of China. The People's Republic of China since 1949 have a bad reputation. The government have a bad reputation of talking the talk and then changing it around and then blaming it on something else. COVID-19 is exactly the same as that. We all know it started in Wuhan, but they try to manipulate it to other places. And because of the media block, a lot of people would only get their news from state media, and state media is controlled by the government, period. Yeah. They only do the narrative there. You wouldn't find much negative in these kind of broadcasts from the Chinese state media. These could be like Xinhua News, this could be China Daily, China Digital Times, Global Times, etc. There's many English speaking. And here on YouTube, you would find a lot as well. I can talk about this for hours, and I'm sure some people would agree and go into the complexity of the whole thing. But this is my own eyewitness report that I was walking through the protesters on my normal daily life. I didn't have any problem. They didn't have any problem with me. No one asked me, who do I support? I didn't see any violence. Yes, there was violence. Yes, there was. But this is tiny compared to the 2 million people who were upset about China lying to them or China not keeping their promises. And this is why England or the United Kingdom and lots of other countries have opened their borders, saying you can come and live here. We will help you get the right visas, get the work, etc., and make the UK home, which is actually very noble of these countries that did want to help, that people are not happy. Some people can't afford to do this and they have to stay in Hong Kong. So you actually start to feel sorry for these people. Again, I'm not going into the complex side. There's the Chinese side, there's the Western side. Both medias, I repeat, both medias did overexpose. BBC, CNN, China, CCTV1, CTGN, all opposite each other, blaming each other. Who is right and who is wrong, I would say, is who is the person who started it. And the person who started it was China. Thank you. Mainland China.